My name is Marshall Greaves. I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life I believed loyalty was the foundation of family. I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a quiet town where everybody knows everybody, where your word means something, and where breaking trust isn't just frowned upon, it's unforgivable. I built my life around those values. I owned a lumber mill for nearly 30 years, employed half the folks in town at one point or another, and never once went back on a handshake deal. I married Lorraine when I was 24 and she was 20. 28 years we were together. We raised 2 kids, both grown now, both living their own lives out of state. I thought we had something solid. I thought we were partners. I was wrong. It started small. Lorraine began deleting text messages before I could glance at her phone. She'd make excuses not to join me at family gatherings, saying she had a headache or wasn't feeling social. She started dressing differently. Nothing too obvious, just a little more effort than usual. And then there was Bryce. Bryce is my nephew, 29 years old, my younger sister's only son. I helped raise that kid. When his father walked out, I was the one who taught him how to throw a football, how to change a tire, how to be a man. I even gave him a job at the mill when he was struggling to find work. I treated him like my own, and he repaid me by sleeping with my wife. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I didn't know it for certain at first, just had a gut feeling, the kind that gnaws at you in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. I'd see them together at family barbecues, laughing a little too hard at each other's jokes, standing a little too close. Lorraine would touch his arm when she talked to him, lingering just a second too long. And Bryce, he'd look at her in a way that made my stomach turn. But I'm not the kind of man who acts on suspicion alone. I needed proof. It was early April of 2024 when I decided to do something about it. Lorraine had gone to Spokane for what she called a self-care weekend with some girlfriends. She'd been doing that more often lately, these little trips that always seemed to coincide with Bryce being out of town for work. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have a good time. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed the tablet we kept on the kitchen counter. It was one of those family devices we all used, mostly for recipes and grocery lists. But I knew Lorraine sometimes used it to check her email when her phone was charging. I downloaded an app. Simple thing, really. It mirrored her phone onto the tablet in real time. Every text, every photo, every location ping, it all synced up automatically. I didn't need to touch her phone again. I just had to wait. And the truth came flooding in. The first message I saw made me sick. It was from Bryce, sent late at night. "Can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again?" Lorraine's response came a few minutes later. "Soon. Marshall's been busy with the mill. We'll figure it out." I sat there in the kitchen staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to smash the tablet against the wall, drive over to Bryce's apartment and drag him out by his collar. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, saved the screenshot, and kept reading. Over the next few weeks, I collected everything. Dozens of messages, some explicit, some just affectionate in a way that made my blood boil. Photos of them together. Nothing pornographic, but intimate enough to leave no doubt. Selfies taken in motel rooms I recognized from the highway between here and Spokane. Timestamps and GPS locations that proved Lorraine's self-care weekends were anything but. The affair had been going on for at least 7 months, maybe longer. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I knew that if I did, she'd deny it, Bryce would run, and I'd be left with nothing but a messy divorce and a fractured family. No, I wanted more than that. I wanted justice. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd done, and I wanted it to hurt. Thanksgiving came and went. Lorraine and Bryce were careful around me, but I could see the tension between them. They barely looked at each other during dinner, and when they did, it was with the kind of nervous energy that only made their guilt more obvious. My sister, Carol, was oblivious. She kept going on about how proud she was of Bryce, how he'd finally gotten his life together. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was counting down the days. Christmas was always a big deal in our family. We hosted it every year at our house, a sprawling log cabin on the edge of town with enough room for everyone to spread out. The whole family would be there, my sister and her husband, our 2 kids and their significant others, a handful of cousins, and of course Lorraine and Bryce. It was the perfect stage. I spent weeks preparing. Not just the usual holiday stuff, decorating the tree, buying gifts, planning the menu. No, I was preparing something else entirely. I compiled every piece of evidence I'd gathered into a slideshow. Photos, messages, timestamps, GPS locations. I organized it chronologically, so anyone watching could see the progression of the affair. I even added captions with dates and locations, just to make sure there was no ambiguity. Then I burned it onto a USB drive and hid it in my office. Lorraine noticed I was in a good mood. "You seem happy," she said one evening as we sat in the living room, the fire crackling in the hearth. "I am," I said. "It's Christmas, family time." She smiled, but there was something uncertain in her eyes. Maybe she sensed something was coming. Maybe she just felt guilty. Either way, it didn't matter. Christmas Eve arrived. The house was full of people, laughter, the smell of roasted turkey and fresh-baked pies. Everyone was in good spirits, exchanging hugs and small talk. Lorraine played the role of the perfect hostess, flitting around the kitchen, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Bryce kept to himself, nursing a beer in the corner and avoiding eye contact with me. I waited until after dinner, when everyone had moved into the living room for the gift exchange. That's when I made my move. "Before we start," I said, standing up and raising my voice just enough to get everyone's attention, "I have something I'd like to share." The room went quiet. All eyes turned to me. "It's been a tough year," I continued, my tone calm and measured. "But I've learned a lot about who I can trust. And since we're all here, sharing love and celebrating family, I thought it was only fitting that I share something too." I walked over to the TV and plugged in the USB drive. Lorraine's face went pale. She was sitting on the couch next to my sister, and I saw her body stiffen, her hands gripping the armrest. "Marshall," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing?" "Just sharing some memories," I said. "Since we're all family here." I pressed play. The first image that appeared on the screen was a text message. Bryce's name at the top, Lorraine's response below. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. The message was explicit enough that I didn't need to explain what it meant. The room went silent, not the comfortable silence of people watching a slideshow of vacation photos. This was the kind of silence that happens when the air gets sucked out of a room, when everyone realizes something terrible is unfolding, and there's no way to stop it. The next image appeared, a photo of Lorraine and Bryce together, taken in a motel room I recognized just off Interstate 90. They were smiling, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his chest. The date stamp in the corner read May 12, 2024. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, but no one moved to clean it up. Everyone was frozen, staring at the screen. "Marshall, stop this," Lorraine said, standing up now, her voice shaking. "Stop it right now." But I didn't stop. The slideshow continued. More messages, more photos, GPS coordinates showing they'd met at the same motel at least a dozen times. Screenshots of Lorraine telling Bryce she loved him. Screenshots of Bryce saying he couldn't wait until they could be together. For real. My sister Carol made a sound, a choked gasp that turned into a sob. She turned to look at Bryce, who was standing by the window, his face drained of color. "Bryce," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Tell me this isn't true." Bryce didn't say anything. He just stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Tell me," Carol screamed, and that's when she collapsed. Her husband caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her onto the couch. Someone ran to get water. Someone else was crying. The whole room had erupted into chaos, but I just stood there, remote in hand, watching the slideshow play out. Lorraine lunged for the TV, trying to turn it off, but I stepped in front of her. "Don't," I said quietly. "Let them see. You bastard." she hissed, tears streaming down her face. You self-righteous bastard. I'm not the one who broke our vows, I said. I'm just the one who's telling the truth. Bryce finally moved. He bolted for the door without saying a word, shoving past one of my cousins and disappearing into the night. The sound of his truck starting echoed through the house, and then he was gone. The slideshow ended. The screen went black. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Carol, still slumped on the couch, looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. How long? She asked. How long has this been going on? At least 7 months, I said, maybe longer. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Her husband sat next to her, his arm around her shoulders, but he didn't say anything. What could he say? Lorraine was still standing in front of me, her chest heaving, her fists clenched at her sides. You had no right, she said. You had no right to humiliate me like this. I had every right, I said. You're the one who chose to do this. You're the one who destroyed this family. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, her voice breaking. It just happened, okay? I didn't plan it. You didn't plan it? I repeated, my voice cold. You met him in motels. You lied to me for months. You told him you loved him. That sounds pretty planned to me. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She just stood there, trembling, tears pouring down her face. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. I handed the first one to Lorraine. Divorce papers, I said. I filed them last week. You'll be served officially after the holidays, but I wanted you to know tonight. Her hands shook as she took the envelope, but she didn't open it. I turned to Carol, who was still crying on the couch, and handed her the second envelope. What's this? She asked, her voice hoarse. The deed to the summer house, I said. The one on Lake Coeur d'Alene. The one I told Bryce I'd leave to him someday. Her eyes widened. Marshall, I transferred it into my name last month, I said. It's mine now, legally and permanently. Bryce won't see a dime of it. Carol stared at me, her mouth hanging open. You can't do that, she said. That house has been in the family for generations. And it still is, I said, in my family, not his. I could see the realization dawning on her face. The summer house wasn't just a piece of property. It was worth close to $550,000 sitting on prime lakefront land. Bryce had been counting on inheriting it someday, using it as his nest egg. And now that was gone. Carol looked down at the envelope in her hands, then back at me. He's my son, she said quietly. And Lorraine was my wife, I said. We all make choices. Now we live with them. I turned and walked out of the living room, leaving them all behind. I went into my office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't regret it. Not for a second. An hour later, there was a knock on my office door. Dad? It was my son, Michael. He was 31, a software engineer living in Seattle. He'd flown in for Christmas with his girlfriend, and now he was standing in my doorway looking exhausted. Come in, I said. He closed the door behind him and sat down in the chair across from my desk. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. That was brutal, he finally said. It needed to be done, I said. He nodded slowly. I'm not saying you were wrong, but Jesus, Dad. On Christmas? When else, I said. When would have been better? After she'd lied to me for another year? After Bryce had wormed his way even deeper into this family? Michael didn't have an answer for that. She tried to tell me it was a mistake, I continued, that she didn't know how to stop it. But you don't accidentally have an affair for 7 months. You don't accidentally meet someone in a motel a dozen times. That's a choice, a series of choices. What are you going to do now? He asked. Move on, I said. The divorce will be finalized in a few months. I'll keep the house, most of the assets. She'll get what's fair, but not a penny more. And Bryce, well, he made his bed. He stood up, ran a hand through his hair. All right, I'm going to take Sarah back to the hotel. We'll come by tomorrow if you want. I'd like that, I said. He hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, Dad, I'm proud of you. Not a lot of guys would have handled this the way you did. "Thanks, son," I said. After he left, I sat alone in the office for another hour, listening to the house slowly empty out. Eventually, I heard Lorraine's car start in the driveway, and then she was gone too. The house was silent. The Christmas tree lights were still twinkling in the living room. It should have felt sad, I guess, but it didn't. It felt like freedom. By mid-January of 2025, the divorce proceedings were in full swing. Lorraine had hired a lawyer from Spokane, some hotshot who thought he could squeeze more money out of me. But I'd been smart. I'd documented everything, not just the affair, but our finances, our assets, every detail that mattered. My lawyer, a woman named Patricia Hoffman, who'd been practicing family law in Coeur d'Alene for over 20 years, was ruthless. She took one look at the evidence I'd gathered and smiled. "This is about as open and shut as it gets," she said. "Unless her lawyer's an idiot, he'll advise her to settle." Patricia was right. 3 weeks later, Lorraine's lawyer called with an offer. She'd agreed to an expedited divorce and waive her claim to half the assets in exchange for a lump sum payment of $150,000 and the right to keep her car. It was a pittance compared to what she could have fought for, but she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. I agreed to the terms, and by the end of February, the divorce was finalized. Lorraine moved to Spokane permanently. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment near the north side of town, and according to mutual friends, she got a job as a receptionist at a dental office making around $32,000 a year. It was a far cry from the life she'd had as my wife. But again, that was her choice. As for Bryce, the fallout was even worse. Carol eventually told me what happened to him. After he fled that Christmas night, he drove all the way to Boise and holed up in a cheap motel for a week. When he finally came back to Coeur d'Alene in early January, he found that his life had imploded. The construction company where he'd been working fired him the day after Christmas. Word had gotten around about what he'd done, and no one wanted to be associated with him. He tried to find work elsewhere, but Coeur d'Alene is a small town. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew what Bryce had done. Doors closed in his face. Job applications went unanswered. He was toxic. By February, he'd left town again, this time for good. Carol heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to Portland, Oregon, and was working some low-level warehouse job making about $15 an hour, barely scraping by. She tried to stay in touch with him, but their relationship was strained. She loved her son, but she couldn't forgive what he'd done. Not yet, anyway. And the summer house? The one Bryce had been counting on inheriting? I kept it. I spent the first few weekends of spring up there, cleaning it out, making repairs, repainting the deck. It felt good to work with my hands again, to focus on something tangible. The lake was peaceful, the air crisp and clean. It was exactly what I needed. I also made it clear to Carol that she and her husband were still welcome to use the house whenever they wanted. I wasn't punishing her for Bryce's actions. But Bryce himself? He'd never set foot on that property again. Not while I was alive. As winter turned to spring, I started to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. They were supportive, never once asking me to justify what I'd done. I also started volunteering at a local men's support group for guys going through divorces. The group met every Thursday night at a community center downtown. There were usually about 10 to 15 guys there, some fresh out of their marriages, still raw and angry. Others had been divorced for years. Eventually, one of the younger guys, a kid named Tyler who couldn't have been more than 25, asked me, "Marshall, what's your story? You seem like you've got it together." So I told them. Not all the gory details, but enough. I told them about Lorraine, about Bryce, about the Christmas reveal. When I finished, Tyler said, "Man, that takes guts. I don't know if I could have done that." "You could," I said. "You just have to decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And then you act." By April, I felt like I'd turned a corner. The anger had faded, replaced by something calmer, more resolute. I just felt done, like I'd closed a chapter of my life and was ready to move on to the next one. I started dating again, though nothing serious. A woman named Julie, a teacher at the local high school, took me out for coffee one Saturday morning. We talked for 2 hours. It was nice, easy, no pressure. I also threw myself into fixing up the main house. I repainted the living room, replaced the old carpet, updated the kitchen appliances. It was therapeutic. My kids came to visit more often. Michael drove down from Seattle a few times, and my daughter, Rebecca, flew in from Denver in May. We spent the time hiking, fishing, cooking together. They just wanted to make sure I was okay. And I was. Better than okay, actually. One evening in late May, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Carol. "Can we talk?" it said. I called her. "I just wanted to apologize," she said, "for how I reacted, for blaming you." "It's okay," I said. "You were protecting your son. I get it." "No, it's not okay," she said. "What Bryce did was unforgivable. I know that now." We talked for a while longer. By the end of the call, I felt like we'd reached an understanding. We weren't where we used to be, but we were somewhere. And that was enough. June came, and with it, the start of summer. I spent more time at the lake house, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I took up kayaking, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. One Saturday afternoon, I was out on the lake when I saw a family on the shore, a father, a mother, and 2 young kids. They were laughing, building a sandcastle. It reminded me of the life I used to have, but I didn't feel sad watching them. I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd had the strength to walk away from something that was broken. I paddled back to shore and sat there for a while, letting the sun dry my skin. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. By September, I'd started seeing Julie more regularly. We'd gone from occasional coffee dates to weekend trips, and I found myself looking forward to spending time with her in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. One Saturday, we drove up to the lake house together. When we pulled up, she got out of the car and just stood there, taking it all in. "Marshall, this is beautiful," she said. We spent the day there, kayaking, grilling burgers, sitting by the fire. At one point, she asked me about Lorraine. "Do you ever miss her?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I miss the idea of her," I said. "The person I thought she was, but the real her, no, I don't miss that." In October of 2025, nearly a year after everything had gone down, I got a call from Patricia Hoffman. The final paperwork was done. "Everything's finalized," she said. "The house, the summer property, the retirement accounts, it's all in your name now. You're officially free and clear." That night, I drove out to the lake house alone. I brought a bottle of bullet bourbon and sat on the dock watching the stars come out. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the anger, the way I'd refused to let it destroy me. I thought about Lorraine in Spokane, Bryce in Portland, and myself. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was just different, wiser, more careful with my trust. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, raised it to the sky, and set a quiet toast to the life I'd left behind and the one I was building now. Then I drank, and it tasted like freedom. Looking back now, I don't regret what I did that Christmas of 2024. Some people might say I was cruel, but I don't see it that way. They made their choices. They lied. They betrayed. They destroyed something sacred. All I did was show everyone the truth. And the truth is the foundation of everything. Without it, you have nothing. So if you're going through something similar, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, here's my advice. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let them rewrite the narrative. Stand up, tell the truth, and then move on with your head held high. Because at the end of the day, your integrity is the only thing you truly own, and no one has the right to take that from you. I'm Marshall Greaves. I'm 53 years old now. I live in a house that finally feels like mine. I have good friends, meaningful work helping other men, and a woman who makes me laugh. And I sleep well at night, knowing I did the right thing. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you think. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.